Welcome to Movies Are Life. I'm your host, Nathan Chandler, and today we are going to celebrate the year of movies in the year of 2023. Exciting times, and I am happy to bring in Mark Blitch, who joined me last year to take on this task. How are you doing, Mark?
Doing great. Thanks for having me again. I love it.
Yeah. So I always like to front this as, unfortunately, we're not privy to the screeners that come out for award shows. And so a lot of the movies that have been making top 10 lists, some have just not even come out in theaters or even in some of the streaming services. So I know there's a lot of films that I want to see, but I just haven't been able to see them yet.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. I tried to do a mad dash since I knew that we were talking today. I kind of did a mad dash this weekend while I could. I still haven't seen Killers of the Flower Moon, which is I pretty much should reserve a spot for that in my top 10. And I hadn't seen The Holdovers or Past Lives. No, I'm not Past Lives. I haven't seen Poor Things.
Oh yeah. I have seen Killers of the Flower Moon, but yeah, the three others that you mentioned, I haven't seen those yet, even though I've been wanting to. So, and once again, I also, we're not privy to screeners and that sort of thing, but so I do my best to try to catch I get a sense of what the most talk about films are, but 2023 for you, kind of you step back, take a big perspective of everything. Do you think this was a good year for movies?
Oh yeah. I mean, usually I'm going to be hard pressed to say it's a bad year for movies. Yeah. I mean, I saw a whole bunch. I have noticed that like my top 10 has come more into form in the past month or so, which kind of shows that there wasn't maybe a whole lot worthy of a top 10, too many before. Plus, I just hadn't gotten around to seeing as many Oscar movies as I want. I usually just kind of watch whatever, floats my boat at the moment. I'm not as intentional as I should be, but no, it's a great year for movies.
Yeah. I would agree as well. Kind of looking at my list now. I'm not someone who just likes to see everything. Like if I'm going to spend time watching a movie, I like to watch things that are good. And so most of the movies that I've watched, I've generally liked and stuff. I would say when compiling this list, there wasn't as many just like, super like 5-star movies. But I feel like for this year, there's been a lot of great movies. Usually if I didn't give them 5 stars, if there was just a little nagging something that kept me from that. But I think there were some very, very solid films. And honestly, with the superhero genre dying, it's kind of made a way for maybe more original content to take the spotlight.
Yeah, and I think studios are taking note. I think especially this year, and especially maybe with the writer strike and the actor strike, they've first of all, I think I'm a huge MCU homer, but I can tell you my interest has waned, not because there's a whole, there's too much reliance on media that I haven't watched, I haven't seen all the, MCU shows up to date, and this, they haven't necessarily been very good. And I do think they'll fix that. Although there is an MCU movie in my top 10, so I'm not going to say it's completely gone. But I think you look at like Oppenheimer and Barbie, and you look at Killers of the Flower Moon, Napoleon, people will go see these action movie, stuff that's a little bit harder it's hard to market. Like Oppenheimer made almost $1 billion, and it shows that people are craving for good content, I can't believe I said content. Good films. People are craving for it, but I think I think the audience is smarter than people give it credit for.
Yeah. And that people are actually willing to sit for a long time in a movie theater.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Which, it's kind of one of those, Honestly, I mean, I know there's always kind of metrics, and I do believe that like certain run times might attract certain people. But honestly, if a movie is just good and that word gets out, people are going to go see it. So, I mean, I know even probably Barbie was a little bit longer for like a quote unquote comedy, but people weren't like, now, how long was that movie? They were going to see Barbie just because they heard it was good, you know?
Sure.
So, yeah, I think people will show up. But yeah, I watched. I was trying to look on Letterboxd. If anybody wants to follow me there, my username is nchandler. I like to log everything there. I've easily seen over 125 films this year, but my list is always kind of. That list is always kind of a little weird because, especially if you listen to this podcast, we've been doing the 50 best rom coms. So there's a lot of a lot
Yeah.
of repeats and older movies in there.
Yeah, that's kind of how my list is too. I think I just finished a movie before we started talking, which puts me at 190 for the
Jeez.
year. That's not counting TV shows either. We'll get to that later. But yeah, and I haven't been able to get to the theater as much as I've wanted to. So a lot of the times I'm either renting it or watching it over a couple days when I can, when the kids aren't doing something. Like we're in a very busy season, as they say. But I'm still finding time.
Yeah, definitely the theater, a little harder to get to. But now, some things, there's some movies that I wanted to see that I just didn't get to see yet. That they aren't just readily available on a streaming service yet. You mentioned like Past Lives. That's not, so some of those type of even smaller movies, I've been surprised they haven't come out on a service as quickly as they used to. So I think they're starting to try to get those pure rentals
Yeah.
dollars in before they do that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, before we jump into this discussion, just a little, we'll interweave. I asked some of my guests from this past year to submit a clip from talking a little bit about their favorite movie. So that'll be weaved in and out of this conversation. So that'll be fun for the listeners to hear. So, well, we'll jump into it and start at number 10. Do you want to go first or you want me to go first?
I can go first.
Okay.
I will say I had about four movies that are kind of in my honorable mention that were in my top 10 at some point. I had a movie called Significant Other. It was actually it was on Paramount Plus. It was pretty solid little, couple goes camping, and it just kind of starts. You just kind of zoom out, and it gets really crazy. Mission Impossible. I saw it after Indiana Jones, and I really just based it off of the train sequence. Like the train sequence in Dial of Destiny was so bad to me that you look at the Mission Impossible train sequence where it's like, oh, they're actually on a train during the day. Talk to Me, which was the A24 horror movie, and then Missing, which was Screen Life movie, where it all takes place on the screen. Like that's where all the action is. And I thought that was really fun. Anyway, so those were kind of my honorable mentions. Number 10 is Godzilla -1.
Okay, I've heard a lot of talk about this film recently.
Yeah, it's not connected to the MonsterVerse, not connected to Godzilla versus Kong. It's strictly a Japanese Toho movie, and it's about this kamikaze pilot who I don't want to say chickens out, but he abandons his post and lands on an island. And, Godzilla kind of represents that, it's a physical representation of, the guilt that he has. And then, it follows him home. And it was just a really good, plus there's some pretty sweet Jaws references in it. And it's just I saw it with my son, and I think it might be the first foreign movie he and I have ever seen in the theater.
Okay.
So, but it was really good.
Yeah, it's subtitled?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a dubbed version out there, but I'm kind of a purist to where I want to hear the actor's voice, the real actor's voice, not dubbed over.
Yeah, I'm in the same camp as you with that. So, yeah, that's a good pick. I was wondering it's playing in the local movie theater here, and that's one of those like with the winter break approaching. I'm like, is that maybe one I should try to go sneak off and see?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really not Whitney's type of movie.
No, and again, it's not. I'm not saying it's. I was just really surprised.
Yeah,
I didn't think that. You don't really go see Godzilla movies for the human element as much, and every time they've tried to do that, they've failed. And so I was pleasantly surprised that the human element was the anchor of the movie.
yeah, yeah, awesome. My number 10. I would be surprised if you didn't see this. This seems kind of like a Mark Blitch movie, but it's Air, directed by Ben Affleck.
I didn't see it.
Huh?
I did not see it.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, I'm surprised.
I should have. No, I should have.
Yeah. Anyway, just probably not the best movie ever, but it really kind of felt like a kind of a throwback. Now, one thing about it is that like if you have the backstory. This was a story that wasn't new to me necessarily. For Whitney and Hallie, it was definitely for Hallie. But it just, if you like those kind of just rat-a-tat, dialogue-driven, kind of dramatic, heavy. I mean, obviously, great performances from Matt Damon and Ben Affleck and some other people. It's been a little while since it was back in the spring when it came out.
Right.
But not that it's like Jerry Maguire, but if you kind of like that vein of a movie. But yeah, just kind of the backstory about how basically Nike became the juggernaut that it is now by acquiring Michael Jordan. Oh, Viola Davis is in it. Just some great performances. And, really it's one of those probably like, I don't think it's the greatest movie of all time, but just as a pure enjoyment, it's like watching famous people who are really good at acting, delivering lines in a great way. And it was just a good, entertaining snippet of a story.
I've regretted not seeing it.
Hi, I'm Whitney Chandler, wife of Nathan Chandler, your podcast host, and a frequent guest of the pod. And I had a lot of movies that I liked, but I guess I'm supposed to only name movies from this year. So, Air, I really liked Air, found it very fascinating. But my number one movie has to be Barbie. Loved Barbie, loved everything that it stood for, and that's it.
What's your number 9?
Number 9 is No One Will Save You. It's the Hulu original. I believe it's 20th Century Studios. Basically, it's Home Alone with aliens and no dialogue. So It's essentially a silent film. It was written and directed by the guy who directed Spontaneous. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that, but that's another really, really fun movie. And we'll talk a little bit more about it. I think I'll have a couple other things to say about it, but I think it doesn't necessarily stick the landing, but Caitlin Dever, who's the lead, I always love nonverbal storytelling. And so just her performance, which is all just driven by emotion and reaction and not really having to say anything, plus with the visual storytelling of just moving the camera in a way that's compelling. It doesn't stick the landing, but all the home invasion stuff is just so good, and it's a lot. I watched it with my 14-year-old, and he's flipping out during the whole thing, and it's great. And so and if you like Signs, if you like Quiet Place, those kind of movies, it's in the same vein.
Yeah, I really wanted to check that out. Just once again, kind of like the Godzilla -1 film, a film I just kind of heard a lot of people talking about. My buddy Kyle, who's been on this podcast before, he checked it out and he liked it a lot. And it was on my list of hopefully I was going to try to get to watch it before this podcast. I just didn't get to it, but it's still on my watch list. So I definitely want to check it out. So I'll say, like, even some of the films I hadn't seen that were on your list last year, I checked out, and I always was a better person for it.
Yeah, because I have incredible, impeccable taste.
Right, exactly. So my number 9, I always have a movie on my list that I feel like, I put it on the list, and if somebody checked it out, they would then decide to basically make sure I'm okay. Do I need to get, just something that's really off the wall and strange. But it's Beau is Afraid by Ari Aster, who has a very, very warped mind. Did you see this movie?
No, I actively stayed away from it, not out of any reason other than it just seems like a lot.
It is a lot, and honestly, it's not. I mean, I would probably pick his other films, Midsommar and Hereditary, over this. I don't know. It's a little hard. There's some things that don't work in this movie. It is 3 hours, and it's a 3 hour slog of Joaquin Phoenix's character essentially getting tortured for the most part, as far as like mentally. And if I just want to warn people, if you have any kind of mother issues at all, this movie will hit close to home. But so it's a movie full of like scenes that are really, really work. Like some of the, most effective scenes I've ever seen. Then there's some that I wasn't hanging with as much. It's not quite as horror bent as his other movies are, even though there's some kind of horror elements to it.
Yeah.
But it's just this inside look into this man's brain, and it's a wild ride. It's a wild ride, and if anything, completely memorable. So anyway, but it's definitely it's not one that I would recommend to everybody, but definitely if you're a fan of his other films, I think it's definitely worth checking out. And Joaquin Phoenix is amazing in it. So that's my number 9.
Of course, and it's one of those where I think there are some directors that kind of have those heat check movies. Like I think Christopher Nolan's heat check movie was Tenet. It's like, hey, I'm just going to see how hot I am. And,
Yeah.
and Beau is Afraid seemed like a heat check movie.
Yeah.
And so, I even thought that Midsommar was his heat check movie after Hereditary, because Hereditary is the basis in which I judge horror movies now.
Yeah.
It's kind of the baseline. And so I've been kind of wanting him to go back to that. And so I think I saw a trailer and I'm like, I have a lot of friends that would probably love this. And it's just,
Yeah.
if it falls in my lap and I watch it, great. But I wasn't just going to actively seek it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I believe this film did not do very well in the theaters. And I think he did get a lot of money to make this movie. And it's one of those, even after it's over, I was almost a little afraid, like, I don't know if they're going to trust him with anything really much. It'll be interesting to see what he does next, for sure. I'm sure he kind of said like, oh, it's a comedy. It's not a horror film. And financiers were like, great. And then, yeah.
Hi, this is Kyle Radford. I was a guest this past year on Nate's Wedding Planner episode, and I did not enjoy that movie. But a movie I did like that came out this past year. I didn't see a lot of movies that were new releases, to be honest. But one I did like that didn't get a lot of love was Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. It was just a fun adventure movie. Chris Pine was hilarious, and Michelle Rodriguez was great in it. Hugh Grant was having a lot of fun. Just a kind of a silly, goofy movie. And if you're someone who has ever played D&D and had some cool callbacks to the game. So maybe not the best movie this year, but one that I really liked. All right, Nate, thanks for everything you do through this podcast. It's a lot of fun, and can't wait to hear the rest of the rom-com list in the upcoming year.
Okay. What's your number 7?
Number 8.
Oh, number 8. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And it's fun. It's kind of sad that out of the 4 movies we've talked about, neither one of us had seen the others.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know what that means. But number 8 for me is John Wick Chapter 4. Okay. I am a John Wick homer through and through. I think it's it's Mad Max levels of beauty. I think it's staged so well. It fully embraces like a Looney Tunes concept, and I don't have much to say other than just I love John Wick movies. It is very long. Didn't need to be that long. But again, I also saw it with my 13, 14-year-old who's freaking out every great action scene. And I'll be curious to see if they do any more. But if this is kind of where it ends, then I would say bravo on them.
Yeah. John Wick is just one of those series I just haven't jumped into, and now it feels like it's like so far away from me. It's like they're already at 4. Like there's especially hearing how long this fourth one was. But I heard great things about it. Did you were you able to watch? There's a spinoff, right? A TV show about the hotel.
Yeah, I didn't. I don't think I subscribed to Peacock at the time, and so it's kind of just gone under the radar for me.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. It used to be like from the first movie, it's like, oh man, this world is really big, and they just kind of scratch the surface. Now it almost feels like so big that I don't know what else you can do other than, again, like it does. It goes back in time, but I'm not sure if the world needs expanding outside of Keanu.
Yeah.
In my mind.
Right. Yeah. And I didn't really hear much about it after it came out. So not saying that it's not good. I don't know anybody that checked it out. So yeah. My number 8 film, I actually was able, I really wanted to see it before this conversation, and it did make my top 10 list, but it's Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, that, based off the Judy Blume classic, which I haven't read before, but it just was it's definitely not a movie like Air, but I would say very similar in the way of just like, here's these characters, and it just puts them in scenes that are very true to life and very effective, and it probably doesn't help that I have a 13-year-old daughter in the moment right now. So I feel like a lot of things that happened in this movie, which is set in the 70s, actually reminds me of a lot of the things she's going through now, which is what I kind of liked about this film. It's like, yes, there's a lot of things that change through different generations, but like, everybody's gone through middle school and knows what a struggle that can be. And that doesn't change throughout, everybody can relate to that. So it's just very much of a coming of age movie that's very bold. I would say very realistic, but just very touching. I really enjoyed it a lot.
Oh yeah. No, we may be talking about that movie a little later too.
Okay, great.
Hi, Nathan. I'm glad to talk to you about Killers of Flower Moon. I really liked the book. And so then I was not surprised how much I liked the movie. It was my favorite of the year. And the reason it was my favorite is because Lily Gladstone played Molly Burkhart, and she brought a sort of magnetism and a warmth to the role that humanized and made it a very strong movie. Thank you.
Okay, so what's your number 7 film?
Number 7 is Creed 3. I can't help but not have a Rocky movie or a Creed movie on my list. It's going to happen. It's reserved. And I thought that was back when Jonathan Majors wasn't super problematic at the time,
Right.
or at least publicly, because he's fantastic. I remember just being fascinated by every choice that he made. I thought Michael B. Jordan did a great job kind of carrying the torch. The only thing that is kind of a knock on is I didn't love how he kind of infused a different style in the Rocky fights, but I love the big swing. It definitely works thematically. You can definitely see his influence. And so I'm all for someone's, I'm all for complete and total artistic control. So even if it doesn't always land with me, I love that I love that he was able to do what he wanted with it, and it didn't feel completely out of place. But that was my number 1 for a while, and then some other ones just kind of crept in there a little on top of it.
Yeah, I actually did see Creed 3, even though I didn't see the second one, but yeah. I didn't feel like I missed too much from it, and so I really enjoyed it. It was just a good sports movie. It's a little wrong to say that it felt kind of like I know where it was going, because I mean, if you've seen any Rocky, or I just felt like the first Creed movie had a lot of surprise elements to me. This one, I wasn't so surprised at where it was going. I actually love Michael B. Jordan. To me, his performance in the Creed 3 didn't stand out to me. I kind of wondered, it kind of felt to me almost like since he was in the director's chair, maybe it was a little too much. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I really thought the last scene, the last boxing match was really innovative, and to be really innovative in a boxing movie these days is quite a challenge. There's been a lot of them. So, but yeah, very entertaining movie. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I didn't see it in the theater. I caught it on, I don't know if it's still on Prime Video, but that's where I saw it.
Yeah.
Yeah. My number 7 is the Wes Anderson film, Asteroid City, that came out from the summer. Now, I'll front it with, like, I probably need to watch it again. Of course, it's Wes Anderson, so I mean, as soon as you see it, you know it's his film. But it's probably a little darker than a lot of his other movies, even though it could still get slotted into that comedy genre. It's probably leans more drama. Actually, it's very dense, but there's a lot to take in. And it was one of those, like, I didn't know how to feel about it after it was over. But it was a movie that stuck with me, especially the visuals of it. And it's a really kind of a commentary on the way culture reacts to. I think he wrote this movie during the pandemic, and it very much feels like that, or just like how as a society we react to certain things. But it's just a movie that stuck with me, and that's kind of how I gauge movies that end up on my list. And so I don't know if somebody hasn't seen a Wes Anderson film before, I don't know if this would be the first one I would show them.
Right.
but definitely once you've seen his other movies, I think it's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, it's interesting. I started Asteroid City last night, and again, to preface, I think Wes Anderson is a genius. He is one of one, but really, I just don't enjoy watching his movies. Fully appreciate that he's a genius and, again, one of a kind. And Grand Budapest Hotel is probably my favorite of his, mainly because of Ray Fiennes. But there's something that I discovered, I think it was even this morning. I was thinking about, why don't I like Wes Anderson movies?
Yeah.
And I think it's because I'm not a details person. I'm kind of a big picture.
Yeah.
And literally, just, even from a filmmaker's perspective, like I don't have the ability to be that precise. And I think that his precision gives me anxiety, if that makes sense. Because everything is intentional and perfect and framed, like it's flawless, and I just can't handle it. And so, I want to keep watching it, but I remember thinking, like, I honestly was getting not a panic attack, but I was watching it and like, I can't watch this. I can't. It's so perfect in every. It's so intentional to where I was like, I need to watch something not like this.
Yeah.
And I know it's a flaw that's deep within me. And it's 100% my problem.
Yeah.
But I think I did crack the case on why I don't love Wes Anderson movies.
Yeah. It's a movie, and it kind of has similar themes to other movies that have come out this year and that are on my list, dealing with truth and trust. That seems to be a big theme of movies that have come out this year. We'll touch on it. But Killers of the Flower Moon definitely touches on that, of just like how we framed history. Some other movies on my list, and so I don't know. I just think the themes really stuck with me with it, especially as this playwright is like you're essentially seeing the play Asteroid City, but it kind of flips back and forth between a stage play and what you're seeing on screen. It's very heady.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Charles Mills from It'sJustAwesome.com, and I did the Movies Are Life episode where Nathan and I discussed Oppenheimer. And so when Nathan asked me what my favorite movie of the year is, that one immediately came to mind. But I wanted to throw a little bit of a curveball here, because at the time I hadn't seen Barbie. I've seen Barbie now. I really like Barbie. But that's not even my curveball. My curveball is that I really enjoyed Godzilla -1. And I'm calling it a curveball because I just don't think that many people have picked it as their best picture of the year. I think they've slept on this one a little bit. The critics love it, and I know it was pretty popular. I think they're kind of expanding its release. I just don't think people expect a Godzilla movie to be like this, but I just really thought it should be included on this list, if for no other reason than no one else will include it on theirs. And I think the fact that we had an event like Barbenheimer, or however you want to say it, and we had a movie about the making of the atomic bomb, and then we had a Godzilla movie that takes place not just a few years after World War II, but at the tail end of it. I think those movies in the same year, mixed in with this Barbie, they're all kind of intertwined. I think they will all be nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. But I loved Godzilla -1.
What's your number 6?
Number 6 is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Go
I'll
ahead.
go ahead and say it's my number 4. So yeah.
Great. So we'll be able to talk about, like, the thing is, it was number 2 for a really long time for
Yeah.
me. But then as the year came along, I never revisited it. And so it kind of
Yeah.
fell back a little bit. And it's also, weirdly enough, I kind of get the same anxiety watching those movies as I do a Wes Anderson movie. But I think the pace is so frenetic, my brain's able to kind of get distracted by it,
Yeah.
or not focus so much on that. But I love a good old fashioned cliffhanger ending that movies just don't feel like they do anymore.
Yeah.
But it still feels like a complete story, and I love everything about each multiverse. I love every version of Spider-Man. I think it's just one of those where these people are just smarter than you and they're more talented than you. Now then you hear that they kind of work the animators to death, so you kind of feel bad about that. But absolutely just stunning work.
Yeah. I have 2 questions to ask you going off of that. One, well, this wasn't a question, but kind of a thought. I completely understand, because when I saw it in the theater, and there's so much going on, as someone, we're in similar fields, as far as almost every frame, and it's no lie to say almost every frame, I was just thinking about the manpower that took to like conceptualize, to execute. Yeah. But then the movie's going so fast, you can't process that. Now, if you're someone like us, the opposite of us, who just going in to see a movie, I couldn't help but think about that person going like, I mean, sensory overload, like crazy. Yeah. But it's impressive, but also it's just like, it's almost like so much to digest. But I mean, that's what I do like about it for sure. But yeah. And then the second question I had, so you saw it in the theater?
Yeah.
Okay. So did you know of the cliffhanger moment?
I knew that it was part 1 initially, because originally it was going to be like Across the Spider-Verse part 1 and a part 2. And I think, I forgot what the third one's going to be called. I forgot what the third one's going to, what they changed the third one to be. And so I was expecting, I remember thinking like, oh man, this movie's getting long and there's really no resolution. This thing's going to have to wrap up pretty quick.
Yeah, me too.
and then it just ended.
Yeah. And,
a lot of times I'll watch a lot of these movies kind of with my kids, or, the ones that are kid appropriate. Obviously I'm not taking, my 11-year-old to, John Wick Chapter 4. I'll take my 14-year-old. But anyway, immediately after it was done, my 11-year-old's like, I want the second part now.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think it's so hard to deliver a movie that kids just love, to where they elicit that kind of reaction, as opposed to, oh, that was good.
Yeah.
It was I want to see what happens next now.
Yeah. No, definitely. So my number 6, now I'll say my number 6 and number 5. It's one of those, they both could easily be like number 1 or number 2. But my number 6 is Oppenheimer. I thought it was a fantastic movie. It's one of those, I kind of talked about earlier in the recording of this podcast. It was just, there were just some certain things, especially the third act, that didn't necessarily work for me. But it's hard, because I do think this Oppenheimer is a movie that's just, completely defines this year. And I thought it was just fantastic. I thought the fact that people, and yes, I do think it was part of the Barbie phenomenon that drove people, and, Barbieheimer and all that. But it almost pleased me that so many people were watching this movie when it was happening, just because of the subject matter. But I found it fascinating. I think the moral quandaries that are presented were fascinating. It was just one of those, the third act, even though I thought was effective, wasn't as effective as the first two acts.
Sure.
And so it almost felt like a different movie for me, even though probably in hindsight, I can kind of see a little bit. It just became more, all of a sudden it felt like a Perry Mason detective movie a little bit. But I mean, fantastic. Some very like memorable scenes, great acting all around. I'm really glad Nolan kind of went into this territory. I think it was definitely needed, especially after Tenet.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Hi, I'm Sharon Davies. I was on the cinematic masterpiece Clueless episode. My favorite two movies of the year were the Barbie movie, which I expected to be very light and fluffy, and it ended up making me feel seen as a mother and a woman. And the Taylor Swift Eras Tour, because, I mean, where else could you sit for 3 hours and pretend like you were in an arena that you couldn't ever get tickets to? So those were my favorite two of the year.
Your number 5.
My number 5 was Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret.
Okay.
I watched it fairly recently. I watched it yesterday. And I was depressed after a disappointing fantasy football weekend, as well as a disappointing Cowboys game.
Yeah.
And I was not feeling it. And my wife got home, around 9:00, and I'm like, let's watch this. And immediately just fell in love with it. And I'm a sucker for good coming of age movies.
Yeah.
I thought the casting of the kids was perfect. Everyone was believable. Everyone, they didn't, cast like, 16-year-olds as 11-year-olds.
Right.
These kids felt like kids. And, the director did Edge of 17, which I loved. And
That's
I
a good movie.
She did such a great job. And Rachel McAdams, I feel like, deserves a nomination. She won't get it, I don't think, but she's perfect. Benny Safdie, who knew he had all? I mean, he's got like that dude's turning into Taika Waititi with how many times that he shows up on TV and movies now. Just every prayer I thought was genuine. It reminds me a lot of The Black Phone from last year, where the little girl says, "Jesus, what the F?" There's just a lot to pull from it on how you parent religion with your kids. How do you talk about religion with your kids? And, I have 2 boys, but there's still plenty of, and I think what was really striking was just to hear them talk about everything.
Yeah.
That you're not used to 11-year-old girls talking about, like they addressed everything.
Yeah.
And my wife was like, oh, it was a little bit different because, my wife wasn't 11 in the 70s, but I just loved every second of it. It was so genuine. And the hard thing about my lists is usually that I want to be objective, and I want to be, I want to have enough credibility to put the movies that need to be in the top 10. Like your Oppenheimers and your Killers of the Flower Moon, but also I'm a big feeler, and so if you make me feel, Moulin Rouge is in my top 10 of all time. It's just big emotion. It's big emotion. It's big, and it's just a movie about being nice and navigating all these really tough stuff. And honestly, if you can get me bought in emotionally, it's going to be in my top 10 probably.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree. Yeah, I framed it as it just perfectly captures that moment in life when you're dealing with such, not just your changing body, but just your, how do I think about religion? How do I think about these things? But you're also not old enough to buy your own underwear in a department store. Yeah. it balances those two things just perfectly. And I truly saw why it was such, it's such a beloved novel.
Yeah, and I had no idea. I hadn't read it, and but I remember thinking, I don't think that, they approached, puberty and and boys and all this other stuff with such a tender, non-gross, like, they treat it with a lot of care, and they treat it like these kids are kids. There's no hidden motives behind it. It's just kids navigating kid stuff. And there's so many ways this movie could have gone wrong. And luckily, I haven't read the book, but I imagine the source material is pretty faithful. It was pretty faithful to the source material, and I just fell in love with it.
Yeah, yeah. That reminded me. You saying Edge of 17? I need to watch that movie again. I remember really liking that movie.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
it was great.
Yeah. My number 5. We've talked about a little bit. You haven't seen it yet, but it is Killers of the Flower Moon, and it almost kills me because, and we had a podcast episode where we talked about the movie. It's almost really one scene and one particular actor that keeps it from a 5-star movie for me.
Yeah.
But is it
Scorsese showing up?
No, it's not.
Or is it Brendan Fraser?
It's Brendan Fraser, yeah, for
Okay.
sure. So, and I like Brendan Fraser. It was just, and I saw Scorsese defending his performance, but it just completely. If there was like a moment of like moments that take you out of a film completely, Brendan Fraser's performance in this thing does it. But
is it like Foghorn Leghorn stepping into a legal drama?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah,
Yeah, I've heard about it. Heard about it. I'm really excited to see it now.
Yeah, but because I think it's actually a movie. The more I think about it, it's just it. I've and especially listened to other people's commentary about it. It's a wonderful film. I mean, people can check out our episode where we talked about it a little bit, but just a very important movie. Yes, kind of living in Oklahoma, kind of connected to it a little bit more. But I mean, Scorsese. I mean, the fact that he's at the age he is, and he is just, still knocking movies like out of the park, and with amazing performances as well. DiCaprio is great in it. Lily Gladstone. I think Robert De Niro, not a ton of people are talking about him. He's excellent in it. Not that that's not a surprise, but I mean, he's so good in it. I think you can rent it now. It should be on Apple TV Plus soon. So if you're subscribed to that, but definitely a movie people should check out.
Hey, this is Ty Chandler. Nathan and I on the podcast discussed The Birds. One of my favorite movies for 23 was the Mission Impossible movie. Kind of a no-brainer, good entertainment. Seen a lot of trailers on how they made some of the stunts. So it caught my interest before I was even there.
So I already said my number 4, which was Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. What's your number 4?
Number 4 is May December.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Well, I usually it's my number 3. So we can
talk about it. We can talk about it.
So it's literally a movie we finished Saturday night. We're recording this on a Monday, so yeah.
No, it was just. I remember I watched it. I watched it on a plane, so I had to hide the iPad. When she visited the feed store or the pet store. But I watched it not really knowing. Like, honestly, the way it was marketed just on Twitter was just usually you saw Natalie Portman and Julianne Moore looking at a mirror together,
right?
And so I thought it was Todd Haynes, and so I'm like, oh, this is a lesbian drama, and then people kind of start bringing up I think it was Mary Kate Letourneau, the 7th grade, the 7th grade teacher who dated one of her students, and I'm like, oh, this is a much different movie than I thought it was going to be, and it's one of those movies that, as far as like establishing a tone, there is a fine line that Todd Haynes walks with. Is this a comedy? Is this a thriller? Mm-hmm. Is it campy? Or is this like a memoir or a tale of abuse? And so, because I remember laughing a whole bunch, with Julianne Moore asking, saying that they're out of hot dogs, her crying whenever the neighbor moved away, and she took it so personally, even though the neighbor was going to go take care of like a dying relative, like she somehow made it about her. and then Charles Milton, who might just win the Oscar. He basically plays he plays the he was 13-year-old whenever he had an affair with this older woman, his teacher, and he's 13 in the whole movie. I feel like he's a 13-year-old who he's a 36 or 37-year-old who has not matured in over 20 years. And there are these moments that he has where he's going up against Julianne Moore and Natalie Portman, and then he's by himself watching his daughter graduate. And I'm like, this, and I remember seeing him in one of my top shows from the year. He was in Poker Face. Okay. And never really thought of him as like a heavy hitter. Yeah. And then he just blew me away. And it's a wonderful critique on method acting. Yeah. And how, I think Natalie Portman said this in her Actors on Actors thing, where they're asking the question is, if you're presenting something as entertainment, are you somehow complicit? Are you endorsing it? Not necessarily endorsing the act, but you're endorsing the sensationalism of it all.
Yeah. I think May December, it probably could have its own episode devoted to it. Yes. I totally agree with you on his performance. I think Natalie Portman and Julianne Moore, they're also amazing in this. I almost think because of their pedigree, they might steal the limelight for, man, he's doing some amazing stuff in this. A very quiet performance, but so layered. And so this movie ended, and when it ended, I was kind of like, huh. Yeah. And Whitney finished it a little bit later after I did. And then, so yesterday we're hanging out, and it literally was like we were getting ready for a Christmas party. We kept on going, like, when this scene happened, like, it was a movie we kept talking about throughout the day. And I think it's this movie. I don't know if it'll ever get lumped into, there's always a category of the movies about the movies. I really think this movie is secretly one of these movies, because what Todd Haynes is doing here, he's completely messes with your, we watch a film about Ray Charles or, any fill in the blank celebrity. Yeah. And even as someone who I watch movies, I still can totally get wrapped up into something like Elvis, even though there's a lot of artistic liberties. But still, there's something that we come out of a movie going, I know everything about Elvis now, right? Yeah. And so this movie is completely saying, we see these like Datelines, we see, these documentaries, and we feel like we know everything about the subject. Even in this case, you would see Gracie and her family, and you're like, oh, can you believe Gracie? But Natalie Portman's character, she just thinks she has it figured it all out. And the fact that it's just such a criticism on, just truth. And like, we just never truly understand people. Natalie Portman's character thinks because she lives basically with his family for 3 weeks, she understands the truth of who these people are. And then, kind of at the end, I think that last scene is just like, it's such a epitome of like, yeah, she has like no clue. But, she didn't really get into the bottom of anything really. And so, yeah, it's just in the roles we play. I thought it was pretty fascinating, and just a movie. And you were talking about the tone, Whitney kept on talking, especially with the soundtrack, you kept on thinking it was going to go into this like Lifetime, like killer aspect. And it goes in these territories that it never does. And it also leaves a lot of holes open where you're like, wait, I don't understand. Like, who's he texting, but like, I think that's the whole point of the movie, is that like, yeah, you truly don't know what people are going through, especially from a media perspective. So, yeah.
Well, and I think my favorite part is whenever she's like, man, all these boys, they look 13, they're at 30, but they're kind of missing that sex appeal. And I'm like, guarantee that conversation has happened at some point in Hollywood. Yeah. And just the disconnect that these Hollywood people think that they can tap into the nuances of, and again, there's not a whole lot of nuance. It was abuse, and it was, and And I'm not sure if you've seen it, but I saw it on TikTok. There's other where they have the Mary-Kate Letourneau and her husband now. They're doing an interview on who's the boss. Okay, well, who is the boss? And the kid was like, I mean, I didn't know any better back then. What do you mean? Who's the boss? And then it cuts to a May December scene where Julianne Moore's like, who was in charge? But who was in charge? But who was in charge? I was 13 years old. Yeah, but you seduced me. I was 13 years old. And there's something so ridiculous about it. And honestly, it's a movie that I just kind of can't stop thinking about.
Yeah.
And I haven't got my wife to watch it yet, but man, it's just so good, and it very well may creep up the list before the years.
Yeah, yeah, it might gain some momentum, especially being on Netflix right away.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Todd Ferguson. I was on the Dear Evan Hansen, The Menu, and the Love Actually episodes. So my favorite movie of 2023 was, oddly enough, Barbie. I have no emotional connection or any nostalgia for the toy. I didn't play with it when I was growing up. So that was not a component there for me. But I found it a really compelling movie. I thought first it was artistically, visually really intriguing. I thought it was just a beautiful movie. Second, I thought it did two competing things really well. It celebrated this toy that was really meaningful for a lot of people and a toy that tries to empower girls. But it also criticized the toy. And I thought the writers and director did a great job of threading that needle carefully. And then third, I'm a sociology professor, and so I often teach courses in social theory, and this was a remarkable movie to demonstrate a lot of the theories that I teach. And one in particular is Simone de Beauvoir's theory of the woman as other. And it taught this theory better than I could lecture it any day. So I'm definitely going to use it next spring when I teach my course. So yeah, so my favorite movie this year was Barbie. Thanks.
So that was my number 3. And sorry, I keep cutting you off with mine. So what's your number 3?
my number 3 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I know
that's the one I thought you were going to mention. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's, again, it doesn't have to make sense. One, I'm a James Gunn homer. I think he's a fantastic storyteller. I think he's going to do great with Superman. Me and my family, we watched all 3. We watched all 2 before seeing it. And it was just one of those moments where there's just nothing that would have made me not like it. Like I felt like it didn't stand a chance. It was my number 1 for a really, really long time. And it was never not going to be on the list. I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I just felt like it hit every emotional beat. And again, for some people who don't connect with Guardians at all, I understand why it may not be very high on their list. But for me, I've loved these characters for, almost a decade or maybe a little bit less. But so to see it land the plane so well for me and so emotionally satisfying, the last 5 minutes, I feel like moved me more than most movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was with my family and with my kids, and we were all kind of crying together. And so you can't really quantify or blame me for that either.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I would never probably, like I've seen some Marvel stuff, not as much as you have, but I got to see this in the theater, actually in my hometown, with one of my best friends, Abel. And Abel is a big Marvel guy, and he definitely connected to the movie more than I did, just because I didn't see the second one. But but I was very entertained. I was very surprised. And so, especially because I've caught some Marvel stuff here and there, the TV shows. So my expectations were pretty low. And so it's probably been the highlight. I mean, would it be fair to say since Endgame, probably the best thing to come out after that?
Yeah,
Maybe
either
one of the
that, either that
Spider-Man
or
movie.
yeah, either that or No Way Home.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely. I mean, I do feel like if you're not completely entrenched on the storylines and everything, I think it's a movie you could still watch and completely enjoy. Like,
Yeah,
it's funny, action, all the good things.
I think it also may signify like the end for me, as far
Yeah.
as this is kind of it kind of closes the book on the Infinity Saga a little bit more, even though they've been pushing a lot of other stuff, and I like all the other ones for the most part, but they just don't they don't touch it.
Yeah.
They don't touch.
Yeah. And it was very much, it was almost like and there's been a lot of television shows that have ended their run. It very much ends very similar to one of those where you're like, all right, I am satisfied that this was, very, very good ending. So,
Oh, yeah.
Hey Nathan, this is Jennifer Graham, and I was on the podcast with you when you interviewed us about Killers of the Flower Moon, and I think the Barbie movie also. But I have to say, my favorite movie this year, I really believe is Barbie, because I grew up playing with Barbie. I had the very first Barbie in the black and white bathing suit. Whew. And I really like Ryan Gosling. He's my favorite actor ever since Lars and the Real Girl. And I want you to know I've been a little disappointed that I haven't been interviewed about Lars and the Real Girl, because that is the best movie of life. I liked Barbie because I liked how it touched on the women's issues. I love the humor of the director, Greta, whatever her last name is. And I just liked everything about it. I liked the music, the dancing, the fun, everything. Thanks for having these podcasts.
So what's your number 2?
Number 2 is Past Lives.
Okay. I so want to see it.
I know.
Yeah.
It's so good. And I watched it with my wife, and it's it's an A24 movie that's not demonic, that for one. But so you're kind of thinking, oh, there's an A24. I wonder what the demonic twist is going to be in this one. But it is just a bittersweet romance drama, and it's about these, it starts off with these 2 Korean kids, they're, 11, 12, 13 years old. The girl moves away. And it's kind of a childhood crush, and then she kind of grows up. They reconnect, 12 years later through Skype, but never in person. And then 12 years later, she's married. He comes, the childhood sweetheart comes to New York to visit. And so it kind of fulfills that in a very sweet, mature way, all those wondering thoughts on what if we reconnected with the people we had crushes on growing up. Mm-hmm. And what kind of closure can you get outside of just having an affair with that person? This movie's not interested in that. This movie's very interested on, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but there's this thing called, I think it's called like Inyoung, and it's basically past lives. Like if you brush up against somebody, there's 8,000 levels of Inyoung between those 2 people, meaning that they had a connection in a previous life. And so there's just a lot of it wouldn't have worked with 2 American people. Because it would have just gone to probably sex.
Yeah.
And they treat there's 3 main characters. There's the main girl, then her childhood sweetheart who's Korean, and then the main girl's husband. And they treat every character with such care and concern, and there's not I don't know if there's true conflict in the movie or not. There is natural or relational conflict.
Yeah.
But there's nothing, this husband could have really, you've seen this movie before. There's one scene, it's not really ruining anything to you, but she's she meets up with her childhood friend. They just kind of walk around New York. The director told the actors, you do not touch at all during those times. So it kind of, there's a little bit of natural relational and physical tension there, but they never look at each other lustfully. But you kind of, they end their evening and the girl goes home and her husband is playing video games with headphones on, sitting on the couch.
Yeah.
And so your brain is telling you, oh, that's the lazy, good for nothing husband.
Mm-hmm.
But then this is even in the trailer. They have a conversation at night where the husband's like, I know I'm the bad guy here. I know that I'm the one who's keeping you from this destiny. They're kind of playfully talking about it. But they address all of these potential conflicts pretty head on, and they do it in such a true relational way out of respect. There's not this toxic, so it's not like a toxic Sophie's Choice, or there's something really pure about it, and I really want you to watch it.
Okay.
But it's one of those that kind of like May, December, I cannot stop thinking about.
Yeah. I have to check it out. It's been on my list. I have these film podcasts I listen to, and with certain movies, I keep them backlogged, and I have like 3 or 4 on past lives just waiting for me. It's a good reminder of like, you need to watch this movie. So my number 2, I'll be completely honest. May, December kept on, like, I kind of reshuffled my order a couple of times. It probably could actually take the number 2 spot, but I'm just kind of going with it. But number 2, I have The Killer by David Fincher.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you see it?
No, I want to. Again, it's just, there's so many stupid movies. I can't watch them all.
Yeah.
And I don't have the time, but I heard it's good.
Yeah. I really enjoyed it. I would say probably for like a Fincher film, probably, even though it definitely has its darkness, it's probably one of the most entertaining movies of his in some while. It's not quite like as dark, gritty, like as like Gone Girl or, Zodiac or something like that, even though it's dealing with this assassin and the perspective from him of basically a hit gone wrong. But it probably reminded me, it's not completely like Fight Club, but it's the first time I felt like, oh, David Fincher can have fun. I feel there's this dark comedic sense, and I think from just watching it and watching this guy's journey, it's just a flat out entertaining movie. Like, oh, this thing's gone wrong. How's he going to fix it? Completely entertaining from that perspective. The action scenes, I kind of jokingly said on Letterboxd, I never thought I'd enjoy watching somebody dispose of trash as much as I did in this movie. Like how he, basically every place he goes to, how he, erases his identity, things like that. But I think it's also David Fincher is also given us, once again, kind of this theme of like truth and perspective, that kind of runs throughout this year. It's one of those where like I'm watching this movie and I'm totally wrapped up in what happens to, we never hear his name. So he's just known as the killer. And it's just like you start rooting for him, but then you're like, why am I rooting for this man? But also in it, I mean, he's clearly a professional, but he's also saying things, but then he contradicts himself and his actions. And it's kind of like, is this guy as good as he says he is? And I think it says it's a commentary kind of almost on like how we view action movies, just almost like how May December is like, how do we view these stories about quote unquote real people? I think from the package with the entertainment aspect of it, but also I think, Fincher is definitely trying to say a lot about this movie, and honestly, probably how people have viewed his movies in the past. But anyway, I really enjoyed it. I always like a David Fincher film. He's one of our best filmmakers out there, but I would say, as I kind of mentioned, it's one of the first ones in a while where I'm like, oh, that was fun. Which Fincher doesn't usually go together.
No, he's got a pretty twisted sense of humor.
Yeah.
I did read something like someone said that the killer is a lot like, have you ever played like the Hitman games?
I haven't, no.
Okay. Well, they're basically saying that this is as if you're playing like these assassin games and you're just really new at it and you just make a whole bunch of mistakes.
Yeah. It's one of those, like, I mean, he clearly is dedicated to his craft by his like practices, but then, it's just one of those, like, nothing ever really seems to go quite as planned, even though it also does. So yeah, it does. You saying that, it does kind of put you in that kind of role playing perspective of like, what would I do in this situation, for sure.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Hi, I'm Hallie, and I've been on no episodes because I'm just cool like that. And my favorite movie was Barbie because it was funny. That's it.
what's your number one?
Number one, it's boring. Number one, I have Oppenheimer.
Okay. It's not boring.
No, it's a boring, predictable answer. I think it's one of those that, so the first time I saw it, I kind of felt the same way you did. I was like, I don't know who these names are that they're talking about in the last hour, it's all back to depositions and cross examinations and stuff. And then I saw it again and I was able just to pick up on it a little bit more. And then I'm actually in the middle of a third time, and it's almost just like it's like a symphony. It feels almost Sorkin-esque in its dialogue. The way everything moves, the way everything's cut together, it's just very clear. It's not my favorite Nolan movie, but I think it's objectively his best.
Yeah. No, I can't argue with that. That's almost like if Killers of the Flower Moon was like, there's a lot of movies on this list that I just can't argue with. So yeah. So my number one, pretty predictable, and I think some people would roll their eyes, but it's Barbie, and so which is a surprise, but not a surprise, but it's easily going to become one of those. Oh yeah, remember when everybody was talking about Barbie? But it was almost more so. I was just the fact that this thing got pulled off, and that Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach, who wrote this movie together, actually have so much to say. And honestly, as somebody, I consider myself progressive, but from my even male perspective, how this movie actually challenged me on certain ways I just naturally think about things. But also the fact that it also made me laugh so hard and just completely creative. I will admit, it's probably, for me, I think it's just the movie when I think back of 2023, Barbie's the movie. So I think that it just owns this year. And I'm even, like, two of my buddies texted me over the weekend, Kyle and Mark, I'll just say their names, not Mark, Kyle and Abel, because I think it just got released on streaming for Max. And I think they liked it, but they're kind of like, I don't see, the big deal. And I can kind of get that, because it was definitely a moment of being in that full theater, and just I just like the fact that something could be so commercial, but also have so much to say. And they even said, like, I can't believe something this meta got people talking so much, but that's what I loved about it. And I loved Gerwig's, all her odes to different styles of filmmaking, and I love comedies. It made me laugh and it made me think, and it's wonderful. I wish the franchise just stopped at right here. It's not, unfortunately. We're going to see spin-offs and all sorts of things, but in this moment of time, Barbie is my number one movie of 2023.
Hey, it is a mirror. It is a cinema. Like, I don't want to use this as hyperbole too much, but it is like a cinematic miracle. Like, it should not have worked.
Right.
And that is, I have no problem with you having Barbie. So we have Barbenheimer. We have that together. So
we're the movie cliche, Mark.
We're the movie cliche. No, and it's what's so funny though is that for a movie that celebrates womanhood and that the man is getting the most credit with Gosling getting most of the
Yeah.
getting most of it. It's just funny to me that Gosling's getting more praise than Margot Robbie, and I love Margot Robbie, and to me, I think for me the reason why I didn't like love it is that I don't know. I felt like while it is a miracle, I think that I think Lego Movie did it just a little better.
I can see that.
Yeah, but this doesn't mean I didn't enjoy myself, and I think it's worthy of. I don't think it should win a whole lot of Oscars, but I do think it needs to be acknowledged.
Right. Yeah.
Whether it's production design, cinematography, Robbie, Gosling, Greta, all that stuff. I think it's going to be represented well come Oscar time.
Yeah.
Hi there, this is Abel Cass. You might remember me from episode 16, Dear Evan Hansen, or 58, While You Were Sleeping. I'm happy to say I don't remember much of what I watched in 2023. It's been quite a whirlwind year, so it took me a while to think about it, but I have to say Across the Spider-Verse released this year, and I think I really do believe, as I said, While You Were Sleeping, episode 58, that I think the trilogy is going to end up being the very best of the Spider-Man movies. So I encourage you to check that out if you haven't yet, all of it. And of course, looking forward to the third in the trilogy myself. I'm wishing everybody a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thanks so much, Nathan, for having me on the podcast this year.
This is going to be kind of a new little segment to this annual show. I'm crediting you, Mark. This was a great idea. Just a couple of little, what would you say, superlatives, I guess?
Yeah.
So
yeah, just
three quick little categories. And the first one, you mentioned favorite male performance. Do you want me to tell you mine since you were the one that threw these out to me?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
So, kind of on my short list, I had Cillian Murphy in Oppenheimer. I think it was a great, the movie's basically all him, but it's a very understated performance. I mean, I'm sure there's, you always think about what's the clip they're going to show at the Oscars.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's going to
be. Right, yeah.
Say.
And so, it's not that wherein some May, December, you could pick out 20 different clips that they would pull. But I thought it was amazing. I thought DiCaprio was wonderful in Killers of the Flower Moon. The fact that he sells you on him being gross is it's DiCaprio, right?
Right.
But I mentioned it earlier, but I have to give it to Joaquin Phoenix and Beau is Afraid, because even though even if you watch the movie and you didn't like the movie, if you can't help but watch it and go man, he just I just felt for the guy the whole time, just how much emotion he has to pour through the performance. It's pretty outstanding. And I mean, he's lately definitely shined in other movies as well, but man, I mean, his dedication to this role of just, you feel for this guy so much. And then his paranoia and, it's really amazing. So even if Beau is Afraid is a hard movie to go to just as far as the overall story, it's worth watching just for his performance.
Man, it's hard to argue. It's hard to argue with Joaquin.
Yeah.
It's a safe answer.
Yeah.
You coward.
Well, and I heard, even though I haven't seen it, I heard he's really good in Napoleon this year as well. So
I actually thought he sleptwalked through Napoleon.
Oh, okay.
It might have been a choice.
Okay.
I'm not debating it. It was just, I remember I was talking with a buddy of mine. I'm like, I don't remember Philip Seymour Hoffman ever phoning in a performance.
Oh,
ever.
Yeah.
And unfair comparison, maybe not. But if you're talking about two of the greatest actors that's ever lived, I was like, yeah, I just didn't. Yeah. Well, Napoleon just didn't land with me on other reasons. But
yeah.
But yeah, no. Good for you. I'm glad you said Beau is Afraid over Napoleon.
Yeah. You're like, where's he going with this one?
Where's he going with this? Yeah.
What about you?
For me, man, I was debating Cillian, but there are so many other great performances in Oppenheimer as well. But I went with Charles Milton.
Yeah.
From May, December. I think I was just so surprised by it.
Yeah.
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 And it feels weird that I picked that up on a movie I watched on a plane.
Yeah.
You're really distracted. But everything about him, there's some people you just can't take your eyes off of.
Yeah.
And I think that I remember thinking, oh man, Downey Jr. has some competition this year.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm kind of more leaning like, no, it's kind of Milton's to lose at this point.
Yeah.
He's been winning a whole bunch, and arguably, I remember watching it and I was thinking Julianne Moore is kind of in that rarefied air of Meryl Streep and even Daniel Day-Lewis. Like there's just she's so stinking great in that movie, and she is, but it wouldn't work without, their scene, in the bed as he's just saying, why can't we talk about it?
Yeah.
He was so game, and they just played off each other so well. And so it was a tough decision, but I would say him.
Yeah. This is completely random, and it's probably a small element of the performance, but even clearly a really good looking guy. And
yes.
Yeah. But the scene where he has his shirt off and we see the little pooch of a belly that like most married middle-aged men have who have children. And, I thought that I know that's kind of weird, but that brought so much to the character too, of like, he almost is like, yes, he's verging on that middle age, but it's almost like the beer belly is overtaking the kid almost.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
Because I'm sure as soon as the movie wrapped, he got back to his 6-pack abs, so.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Okay, so you asked for a favorite female performance. So we've talked about it a lot, but I had Natalie Portman and Julianne Moore kind of definitely like them. But I had to ultimately go with Lily Gladstone for Killers of the Flower Moon. We talked about her performance in our podcast episode, but I mean, it's funny you talk about Charles Melton, almost very similar performance, a very quiet performance. Almost you see so much of the character just in the eyes, and you'll hear her name a lot, but she's amazing in the movie. She's my pick, and I mean also to go toe to toe with the likes of like DiCaprio and De Niro. I mean, she steals the movie. She's wonderful. Well, maybe Brendan Fraser steals the movie, but in the wrong way.
Oh man,
what's yours?
I put Caitlin Dever for No One Will Save You.
Yeah.
Just I wanted to be different.
Yeah.
To be different. And I think it's so hard to carry a movie without talking. And I've been a huge fan of hers since Short Term 12, and just. It's just effortless, and you almost forget. I think the screenwriter said he didn't mean to make a silent movie, so to speak, without dialogue, until he realized, oh crap, this movie's practically dialogue free. And she's just game for anything. She kind of gets put through the ringer physically, emotionally, and she's just great. And any excuse to show some love to Caitlin Dever is something I'll do. Yeah.
Good pick. Okay, and so I really like this category that you came up with, which is favorite movie moment. So I'm sure there's tons, but I came and sorry, it's my number one movie, but Barbie. But I won't ever hear the song "Push" by Matchbox 20 the same way again.
It's a great moment.
Yeah. So do you play guitar?
I think every white male tried to learn how to play the guitar for at least maybe 3 months in college. Yeah. But no, my fingers are double jointed. Yeah. It's not, that's the excuse I'm using.
Yeah.
I would love to.
It just brought me back to just youth camp days and just fires, and there was always that guy who had the guitar and he'd start playing and get everybody's attention, and then you just sit there going, this is not that great as you think it is.
And he can only play one song.
Yeah. Oh, but I think that cut to him singing the song, then everybody singing the song, and just what it transitions to. And even though it's a funny scene on the surface, it's also saying a lot about, gender dynamics. And anyway, that's the one that came to mind. Even though I like the musical segment. I'm just Ken as well, but yeah. That song just will ever. And I heard Rob Thomas. They seem to have a good spirit about how the song was used. Yeah,
they were good sports. They kind of had to be.
I have an honorable mention, but before I want to make sure it's not yours. But what is yours?
No, you can go ahead.
Oh, I have to give love to the testing of the bomb in Oppenheimer. That whole sequence. I mean, riveting, because you know what the result's going to be, right? But still, there's this somehow Nolan. I mean, he's a master editor and director, but I mean, it's cliche to say edge of your seat, but that whole sequence, I mean, you really are, and it's a testament to everything that's happened before that, because the stakes for every character that's part of that testing sequence, and so that's really once again. Movie cliche, Barbenheimer, but yeah. So, what's your scene?
My runner up for movie moment was The Dog Days Are Over from Guardians 3.
Yeah.
Again, just everything built up to that moment, and I remember I think I might have been weeping at that point. But I would say my favorite movie moment, I think it might be the gym scene in Oppenheimer. With all the people stomping.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
In the stairs, and I remember thinking oh, that's the whole. And again, they set it up beforehand, but just that to me, and this is kind of where I have come around on Christopher Nolan movies a little bit, is that his most emotional payoffs are not at the end. Interstellar, It's all about whenever he's watching his kids who have grown up. And then this is just everything has been building up to this moment. And then to have it played, it's a scary scene.
Yeah.
And it's chilling. And the way they achieve some of the effects, I was reading that the DP had a projector of the background, and then he would wiggle the projector to give it that kind of
kind
of disorienting, rumbling feeling, which I thought is such a brilliant practical way to do that. That with Cillian, I think if Cillian, his Oscar moment, I think will be processing that whole scene. I think,
yeah,
and just everything from him stepping on a burnt corpse to seeing the guy throw up outside. It's just everything that he feared.
Yeah,
and I think that moment for me is probably hard to say if it's my favorite, but it's definitely the one that's lasted, had the best impression on me.
Yeah. And I would also add to that, tactfully done. This movie needed that element of us seeing what destruction could occur. But, somebody could really lean heavy into that.
Yeah.
And it was just enough, but not too much. You got the horror, but it didn't go over that edge of grotesque or
No.
We talked a lot about Wes Anderson. Maybe if you're not so much a big fan of his feature films, you might enjoy his shorts that are on Netflix. But I didn't really know how to categorize them. And some are better than others, but these 4 short films based on Roald Dahl's adaptations, I thought were fantastic. They were really, really fun. So that's a good way to kind of intake some Wes Anderson without being, so overwhelmed.
It's my problem. I recognize that. I understand that. I'm not. I want to be very clear. If Wes Anderson is listening, that I bow down before his genius.
And terrific American Express commercials as well.
Has he made those?
I think that's why there was some commercial where he featured himself. I think it was American Express. I can't remember. So yeah,
I probably turned it off.
Yeah, a couple of films that I had written down that didn't quite make the cut. Alphabetical order. not necessarily in order here. How to Blow Up a Pipeline, which was a great kind of indie hit. It's on Hulu, so you can check that out. I enjoyed Fair Play, which is on Netflix, which is kind of a erotic suspense thriller. I think I told you about that one, I think. But I think people should check that out. Flora and Son, which is on Apple TV Plus. It's by the guy who created Once and Sing Street.
See, Sing Street was my number one, so I'll have to check it out.
Yeah. If you like that movie, probably not quite as good as Sing Street, but still in that vein.
Is it better than Begin Again?
It's been a long time since I've seen Begin Again, so I can't make quite a fair assessment on
Is it smaller, or does it feel like a studio movie? Like, is it a little bit smaller?
It's a little bit smaller.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Rye Lane, which you can also find on Hulu, and it's a British romantic comedy. If you like rom-coms, you should like Rye Lane. Even though it probably had its faults, Whitney and I really enjoyed Netflix's Untold series and the one on Johnny Football. Yeah, about Johnny Manziel. It's one of those you kind of have to watch. It is like, it's the people telling their own story. So you got to but it kind of brought me back to a time, and I thought it was really interesting. And then also on Netflix, the documentary Wham, just about Wham and George Michael. And nice little film. And it's mainly put together, it's interview segments with Wham, but like no talking heads, and it's all archival footage. And the way, I think, even if you're not a Wham fan, I think the way it's put together, you'd appreciate, Mark, just editing wise and stuff. But it'll make you realize how many of their songs, like, oh, I know that song. Oh, I know that song. I thought it was a great. If you like music docs, really good music doc there. So
if you're a Wham fan, that's an interesting.
Yeah.
Are there Wham fans?
Yes, there's everybody sings Last Christmas, during this time.
That's arguably the worst Christmas song.
I love that song.
Worst Christmas songs, along with Mariah Carey and then Paul McCartney's Wonderful Christmas Time. Those are just
that's blasphemy, Mark.
No, it's not.
I love those songs.
Okay, well, that's fine.
Thanks for going on this journey through the. I think, if anything, we've given people great recommendations, and we had some overlap. No horror movies from you. I guess
this is surprising.
Yeah,
no one will save you. I guess could technically count as a horror movie, but it's. I was just as surprised that I didn't have. It wasn't as horrific as it usually is.
Yeah. Well, as always, check out moviesaurelife.com for all our episodes, and then the reviews to at least most of the movies on my list. I think all of them. And I'll eventually get some up with, now that I know some of the movies that Mark has talked about. I'm going to have to check those out. So you can check out those reviews. So thank you so much, Mark, for coming on. I really hope people listen to next week's episode, because we will be taking on the task of ranking the top television shows of 2023.
Can't wait.
So that'll be a great way to end the 2023 with Movies Are Life, talking about TV, I guess. Well, until then, I guess I'll see you next week, Mark.
Yep, sounds good.
All right, later.